Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to help you answer probably what is the easiest of all the river exam questions, and it's the where you have to explain the formation of a waterfall. So if we look at the revision checklist, it's going to help you to do this bit here, which is the formation of erosional deposition features in river landscapes, the waterfall. And first thing you need to bear in mind, and I've said this with all four features that you could potentially get asked, is that this could be a 6-marker or an 8-mark question. It could be a question where you are asked that you may wish to use annotated diagrams or that you must use. So if we look at question 3 and 4 here, especially the one for the V-shaped valley in the Oxbow Lake, it says with the aid of a diagram or diagram, so you must have some type of diagram, whereas with the actual question on the waterfall here, it says you may wish. Now, if you may wish, you've got a choice of drawing your entire answer using diagrams and annotations, and you can look in your class notes to see how to do that. Or alternatively, you can look at the sequence of diagrams on page 55 of the class textbook, and where there's a really nice simple diagrams with labels and a written answer. If you want to, you can entirely write your answer, which is what I'm going to go through and explain to you now. Now, the first thing to bear in mind about waterfalls is the key thing about a waterfall is to build up on the idea that there are two rocks and that there's a hard rock, the lighter grey one we can see here, sitting on top of a much softer rock. And that is what, that difference in rock with a harder one sitting on top of a softer one is what creates waterfalls. And so how do you approach answering this? Well, if I use before I go into explaining the answer, if you are just wanting to draw a very simple diagram and write an answer, it would be enough to just draw a simple diagram like this, write hard, soft, maybe put the label undercutting on, and that would be enough. You wouldn't get any marks for the diagram itself, but if you were required to use a diagram, then at least you would tick the box of having drawn a simple basic diagram. If we have a look at how to approach sort of sequencing your answer, the first thing that you want to say in your answer is that a waterfall forms when a river moves from a harder rock, for example, basalt or granite, to a softer rock. So you could say, for example, sandstone or limestone. What that means is there's a differential in the rate of erosion that occurs between the harder and the softer, because the river will erode the softer rock because it is less resistant at a faster rate than it will erode the harder rock. Because of this difference in the rate of erosion, a step that we can see here will begin to form in the river as the softer rock erodes quicker. Now, what that's going to do is it's going to increase the rate of hydraulic action, abrasion, and solution on the softer rock as the water pours down. As soon as you mention those three processes of erosion, you then want to tell me what each of them means. So here, if you want to hit the pause button, you'll get a description of hydraulic action, abrasion, and solution. Okay, now you will have written the name hydraulic action, abrasion, and solution, or at least two of them, and describe what each of them, explain how each of them works. And that will get you up to half of your marks if you do that for this exam question. So it's one of the most important steps in answering the question. Once you've used that, you then want to explain that now, because we have increased rates of these, a plunge pool will begin to form, and as rocks tumble down from the upper river here, that's going to increase the rate of abrasion. There's going to be a lot of splashing as the water splashes into the plunge pool, so you're going to get lots of hydraulic action here on the back wall of the waterfall, and you're also going to get increased rates of solution as the water's dissolving the softer rock to chemical action. Eventually, what will happen, and this is the next key point to your marks, is that a distinct overhang will develop. And this is what we call the capstone. So it's the harder rocks hanging above the softer rock, is now unsupported. Until eventually, just through the weight of gravity, the harder rock will collapse into the plunge pool, and the waterfall will move back a little bit, which we can see here. Also now, because there's this collapsed material from the overhang inside the plunge pool, you'll get even more abrasion occurring at the base of this plunge pool, which will therefore further accelerate the undercutting of the softer rock here. Okay. Final step, and it's worth a mark if you mention it, is that over time this process repeats as the harder rock is undercut and collapses, and the waterfall begins to move upstream, creating a steep-sided gorge of recession. And if I jump back to the photograph here, the gorge would be in what we're standing in, so the steep walls of the river we can see on either side, creating the gorge. Here we can see the harder rock with the river up, and at some point it's passed onto a softer rock, and that's creating the plunge pool, which is down here. Okay, so there you have your full detailed answer, and the main points that you want to make in summary are that you have a hard rock sitting on top of a soft rock, that the soft rock erodes at a faster rate because it's less resistant, which creates a step. Because there's now a step in the river, you'll get increased rates of hydraulic action, abrasion, solution. You want to then tell me what those three each of them mean. That then leads to further undercutting until eventually an overhang develops where you have a capstone of the harder rock, unsupported, and because of gravity, it will eventually collapse into the plunge pool. That will add more rock into the plunge pool, which will further increase the rate of erosion happening in the plunge pool through abrasion. So you'll get even more undercutting. Over time, the waterfall retreats upstream, creating a steep-sided gorge-like valley or a gorge of recession.